Are the Washington Redskins better than their 3-10 record suggests? Remember, they won 2 straight, and then they went into Green Bay and lost 15-10, a game that I believe they were winning at one point. So, or are they
worse than their record suggests? Mind blown.
Or, as Bill Parcells would say, you are what your record says you are.
Classic.
Here to answer that question and help us out breaking down this Eagles-Redskins game is John Keim from ESPN.com's NFL Nation. He's been covering the Redskins for quite a while. And it occurred to me today, John, I don't know why today, of all days it occurred to me, that you're originally from Cleveland, and you've been you've moved to Washington, you've been covering the Redskins forever, and I'm like, wow, you have like a personal attachment or tie to 2 of the poorest run organizations in the NFL.
It has been quite a run. I tell people now I feel like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption right now. But yeah, no, it's been, yes, it's been quite a run.
Stamp the papers, lady, and let me move on.
You ever find yourself trying to evaluate which one was worse, the Browns, the Redskins, and then you're like, split the difference here, carry the 2?
Well, it's also really what it is. It's the damage I've done to my kids because, I have a son who grew up a Redskins fan, and then my middle son is a big-time Cleveland fan.
Uh-huh.
And the kicker of it all is that my wife has New England roots. So she's actually Boston-based. And I told my one son, I was like, you could have chose that, but you chose this side. What do you – like, I didn't have a choice growing up there. What are you thinking? So,
that's rough.
There we are.
Well, that's what happens when kids only listen to their mother. You know how it is. Or their father. They should listen to their mother. That's the truth. All right, so I've tried to make the argument, John, and bear with me here, that as bad as Washington is, that their last 3 or 4 weeks suggest, they had a 2-game winning streak, and then they lose. What I think is, they put up a good fight in Green Bay, that they kind of understand their limitations and parameters pretty well. I mean, they had a whole first awful 8 weeks to figure that part out, have the coach fired, and then kind of move on from there. Whereas the Eagles come in a very unique position with so many injuries at running back and receiver that they haven't learned what they're going to be yet. And I almost feel like it's advantage Washington in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any – I don't know if there's – I guess the advantage that the Redskins have right now – well, first of all, the Eagles have the advantage because they're still playing for something legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
They can still make the playoffs, and the Redskins obviously can't. I think where you'd say maybe there's an advantage is maybe I can't even say for next year. I can't go there, but they have a lot of young guys playing, and because of that, I think you get a certain energy that comes along with that. I mean, they have, I want to say like 19 or 20 of their key guys last week were 25 or younger. So again, with that comes energy, and you have guys that still want to make their name and are playing for something, they want, obviously you want to win, but I think they're also playing for something more about themselves. So I think that always helps. So, I think they're playing a better style, or maybe not, I don't know if it's necessarily a better style, but certainly a style that's more conducive for them to try and win. They, a lot of run game. They're not very good on third down, so they don't control the clock, despite how well they've run the ball. And, but yeah, I think a lot of the youth is beneficial at this point.
They seem to do 2 things well that might, kind of hit the Eagles where it hurts. They rush the passer well, and obviously the Eagles will be starting Big V at right tackle, and he's nowhere near Lane Johnson territory. And they also, I guess, intercept passes well. And even though Carson Wentz does not throw a lot of interceptions, the players that he has to throw the ball to this weekend are going to be a whole lot different than what he's accustomed to.
Yeah, and, listen, Deshaun Jackson changed that first game of the year, and it's funny because I kind of go back and think about that game because that game, they looked so good starting off that week in that game, and Deshaun just changed a couple games, and obviously he's not – a couple plays, he's not going to be there. And they don't – but, that's what the Eagles obviously lack. They have had trouble with Carson Wentz, and not just in terms of keeping him in the pocket and getting him down. So I think that's been a big problem for them. He's made plays on the move in 3 of the games that he's played against them. So that's the trouble. Now, they did do well against Aaron Rodgers last week, with the 4 sacks. But, there's always a couple times where he's going to move up in the pocket and escape and make a big play. And so I think that's where the fear always is with a guy like Wentz. But they are rushing the passer better, and they do have a talent. That's where the strength of that defense is, that talented front. It's Matt Onitis, Temple kid. It's Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne from Alabama. They don't have Ryan Kerrigan. He's now out for the year, but they do have rookie Montez Sweat, who will take over, and he'll be on the left side, this week against Big V. So, I think I'll be curious how that goes. But they are rushing the passer well, and they're not stopping the run that well. So I think that's going to be an interesting part of the game too. But they have some things going for them. It's just hard to sometimes find them when you're 3-10.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of where I feel like the Eagles can't hit them where it hurts too much. The Eagles can run the ball against a bad run defense, but they really only have Miles Sanders, who's been good. He's been better almost catching the ball and being an in-space player than just a straight natural runner. And obviously Boston Scott, who played a big role in the game last week, but that was his first time, and he has been used sporadically. Has Boston Scott's name at all come up on the radar for the coaches in their press conference or some of the players on defense this week?
Please say no.
Oh, yeah, I'd say a little bit in that his name was mentioned, but you got to understand right now here, the game is secondary to everything else. So, do you know what I mean? So, like, the talk is more big picture, future stuff than nitty-gritty, hey, how are you going to stop this team? I think some of the talk was more on the offensive side of the ball with a guy like Adrian Peterson, his chance to get 1,000 yards. And, it's about the development of Dwayne Haskins. So that's where most of the conversation centers these days. It's just, we moved past the talking about the upcoming opponent a lot many weeks ago.
Yeah, and we're talking with John Keim of NFL Nation, ESPN.com. Tell us about the development, if there has been any, for Dwayne Haskins. It seems like their plan right now is to run the ball as much as possible and limit his throws to about 20 to 24 a game, which is like a half for Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz. Is that working? Yeah. Is he? I would have thought that having Terry McLaurin to throw to, because they were both from Ohio State, would have been kind of beneficial for him.
It is, but you need a lot to go right for everything to always click that way. You can't just – they're not good enough to have him just focus on one guy. He has found him. There are times where they're timing it where it's not been on. And keep in mind, like last year at Ohio State, they connected. I think McLaurin had like 35 or 39 catches. It wasn't like he was the primary target for him last year. There is a definite connection at times. You can see it. But it's not like it was, 85 passes last year, and they played together for 4 years as a starter. It was 1 year they played together, and I think it was less than 40 catches. So, but it does help. It does help because the guy. But I think where the progress is, let me back up for 1 second. They didn't really want him to play this year because they knew how inexperienced he was. Only 14 starts in college, and as a drop back passer. Matters because you have to master more of the nuances of the position, and that's what they needed him to do. Whereas you get your guys like that can regulate a defense with their legs, and it allows you to maybe trim back the playbook more than you would if a guy's just straight drop back passer. So there was a lot for him to learn. So what the big thing for him has just really been like little things, getting the plays right in the huddle, because he didn't have to do that at Ohio State. So it's just like being able to speak to each group in the huddle and say, this is your assignment on this play. Speaking clearly, doing things like that. Getting the protection calls right. He's improved there.
Not taking pictures with fans with time on the clock? Is that all right, too?
Not doing selfies. Yeah, that's on the list. Listen, but that's part of the growing, maturing process that he has to go through. And then, like, watch what, you guys can see this weekend, are his eyes lining up with his feet when he throws. That's a big deal for them. And that's something where he's slowly progressed with that as well. And I think a big change has been ever since the coaching change, he has been putting in, I would say, more time to get better. He was not doing that before. I mean, he was doing stuff at the facility, but he wasn't doing a lot more outside of it. And that's what you need to do to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. And I think he's been doing more of that. And I think, the one thing I've heard from coaches is that, he's starting to see what the extra work, how it's paying off on the field. And they think that, so to me, those are all the big things. people are getting caught up. Well, he hasn't thrown for 300 yards yet. He hasn't thrown for 250. It's about, hey, you guys don't like this because it's a Philly thing. It's about the product. So that's the big thing for Dwayne Haskins right now. Is he laying the foundation for his career more so than the results? It's really about that.
The Redskins have been stuck in their own process for, it seems like, 20 years. You need to get Sam Hinkie in there to maybe speed some things up, John. But you talked about...
They were in a... Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, they were like the problem for them too is they're always like the last 4 years before this year they were right around 500, so they could always kind of convince themselves that one or two more moves is going to be the difference. If this guy stays healthy this year, if Jordan Reed stays healthy, it could be the difference. But that never went that way. But they were always around that 500 mark so it allowed them to think that they were sometimes. It's like your mirror, objects in your mirror are closer than they appear. And I think success to them was closer than it appeared.
Segue for what I was going to about how this team is going to look like moving forward after the season. But the Eagles just witnessed a similar matchup, which was down in Miami, and that team is tanking for Tua. We heard earlier in the year, and they're not trying to win. But that win for that franchise against the Eagles was a massive deal for them. They're still talking about it. And I think there's an opportunity for the Redskins side of the fence this week that if Haskins can win against the Philadelphia Eagles, hey, they're going to be 4-10. The Eagles are going to be 6-8. It's not like they're going to potentially finish that much further off from the Eagles. Right. So is this game an opportunity for Dwayne Haskins and Terry McLaurin to maybe really make a statement?
Absolutely. And I think, it's funny because you guys know this, like fans are going to want them to come close and look good and lose because you help your draft status if you do that. But yes, if they finish like with a couple wins in their last 3 games, that's a really good thing because, again, I go back to the young players. There are so many young guys who are part of this organization's future, no matter who's coaching, that you want, if you're a Redskins fan, you should want them to look good and I say sneak off a win, but I don't think they really want to do that because, again, they're looking at Chase Young if they can get that number 2 pick. But, but I think you do want them to go out there and look good. And for the players themselves, the players don't necessarily care about draft picks, but they do care about how they're doing. And they do. I think there is a feeling like, hey, if we go out there and do this, we can build momentum for next year. That's their thinking. And so, yes, I do think it would be important, especially because it's a lot of young guys doing it, and they are part of the future. And especially for Haskins, if the quarterback is doing something and it leads to wins, people will get excited because that removes one of the biggest question marks that people would have about this organization is, can Dwayne Haskins do it?
Yeah, well, of course, if you draft Chase Young and you just add him to that nucleus of Buckeyes that they brought in there with McLaurin and Haskins, you might as well try to go out and get Urban Meyer in the offseason. I'm sure that will be one of the big headlines. All right, John, we've run out of time, man. Yeah. We appreciate you jumping on with us. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday. You always do a great job with NFL Nation covering the Redskins for ESPN.com. Really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Always enjoy it. Thanks.
You got it.
Thanks, John.